Recording here. Good morning, everybody. This is a meeting of the CMAQ and TAP-L Project Selection Committee. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and with that, I'll ask John to read the roll.
Hi there, everyone. If anyone's sitting in for a regular member, just please state your name when I call the member's name. Darwin Burkhart. Mark Pitstick from Transit.
Here.
Mayor Grasso.
Here.
Chris Schmidt from IDOT.
Here.
Tom Rickert, representing counties.
Here.
Jeffrey Shriver from CDOT. And Doug Ferguson from CMAP.
Here. Thanks, John. I should have started by reading the Governor's Disaster Declaration. As permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of November 10, 2022, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, we posted the meeting materials in advance and will provide a recording of this meeting linked on our website, as long as taking all votes by roll call. My apologies for not reading that first. So moving on to agenda item 2, agenda changes and announcements. There are no agenda changes, and staff does not have any announcements. Are there any announcements from the committee members? All right, not hearing any. Moving on to approval of the minutes. Included in your meeting materials were the minutes from our November 3rd meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve, Pitstick.
Thank you, Mark. Second?
Freshman IDOT, second.
Rickert, second.
Thanks. I think I got Chris before you got in, Tom. Are there any changes to the minutes as presented?
I just have a question, Doug. Not a change. There's some comments in there in the preliminary engineering requirements section about, I asked for some adjustments to clarify categorical exclusions. Well, when would we see that with the solicitation packages, or will we see it before that? Someone asked about that for some clarification, so I'm just looking for the final language on that.
Yeah, it'll be included in the booklet. Do you want to? If you want to see it, we can send it to you. I'm sure Kama can arrange that to be sent out today.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, appreciate it. So I could share that with somebody.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah.
Any other changes? All right, well, we have a motion on the table for approval. John, could you call the roll?
Sure. Mark Pitstick.
Aye.
Mayor Grasso.
Aye.
Chris Schmidt.
Aye.
Tom Rickert.
Aye.
Jeffrey Shriver. Aye. And Doug Ferguson.
Aye. All right, the minutes are approved. Thank you. And welcome, Jeff. So included, the programming status sheets were included in your packet materials for information purposes. Are there any questions on the status of the projects as presented?
Doug, I have a question.
Yep.
Yeah, I looked at the first table there. I know you've said you've been experimenting with the formatting on that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what are we supposed to get from that first chart? It has a list of projects and some amounts in there, and I'm not sure what is the meaning of it. What do we take from that? It doesn't really show actions or new or changes or what. I'm trying to figure out how can we use that?
Yeah, there haven't been any changes or actions since the start of the federal fiscal year.
Okay.
Just showing where the funds are currently actively programmed for each project. And so the funds shown are just CMAQ funds. They're not total project costs of any stretch. What we're trying to figure out now is how to show when funds go into AC status versus are actually obligated. So that would be the difference there. And we're trying to come up with something that's kind of that's easily reproducible. Yeah, so we're still working on that, but there
Okay.
have been no obligations yet, so nothing has changed.
Okay. So it's just a list for now, and it's a work in progress. That's
Yeah.
fine. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Any other questions? All right, moving on to 4.02, the programming summary and obligation goal table. From our last meeting, you'll remember like we had some issues being over programmed. We were able to move funds around and accommodate all the cost changes that were requested last time. There's still one issue that we have to bring a project back into 23, but we're working with the sponsor to make sure we understand how much needs to be brought back into 23. But we're in pretty good shape. There's been no obligations to date, which isn't unusual, as it's still we're only a little over a month into or 2 months into the federal fiscal year. But with that, are there any questions on the obligation goal and programming summary table? All right. Oh, Mark, yeah.
I'll stay, just so you know that somebody's looking at this stuff here. So we have a huge obligation goal, $200 million this year. We've never really come close to that. So any thoughts on whether we're come anywhere near that? Do we have some big projects that are in the works that are going, or where are we?
Well,
realistic?
The obligation goal is set basically by what our current federal appropriation is for this year, plus the unobligated funds, so our unobligated balance. So in all likelihood, we will not reach this obligation goal. I mean, we would be in unprecedented territory, but I still want to kind of like reiterate that there is a need to get funds. We do have some big projects that are coming in the pipeline, and I'm sure if near the end of the federal fiscal year that CDOT would be more than willing to transfer more money to the state lake project, as they have several years of funding lined up. Just nothing in this current 2023 year. They have funds in 2024 and 2025. So.
Yeah, with that project, Jeff, is there work that can be done this year, or you could enter into contracts or anything to start to really obligate some of that funds?
Yeah, so we're wrapping up final design now. It's basically 99%, and doing pre-construction activities, utility work, and have the primary contracts are in process to be advertised very soon. So we expect to have full work underway next year. So yeah, once that's in process, it can start absorbing a lot of funding very quickly.
All right, great. Thanks.
Any other?
And it's going to look spectacular too, I might add.
Any other questions on the obligation goal and program summary table? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to project change requests. John, you want to take these?
Sure, yeah. So included in your meeting packets today are requests for 2 project changes. The first is a CTA-led project, the Bus Slow Zone Elimination Program. And the sponsor requests a scope change to add additional routes to the scope, as 3 routes included in the initial scope are being completed with additional funds. And the new routes include the Ashland Corridor, the 63rd Street Corridor, the expansion of the Halstead Street Corridor, south of 70th Street to 95th Street, and then the Chicago Ave Corridor, adding a segment along the Grand Ave, Illinois Street between Fairbanks Court and the Kennedy Expressway. CTA and CDOT were able to secure other funding to complete the Western Ave, Chicago Ave, and 79th Street corridors. And all the replacement corridors represent high ridership routes, similar in nature to existing routes. And since ridership is also comparable between the replacement and the new corridors, the project was not reanalyzed. And then lastly, additional funds are not required to complete the work of the additional route. Staff recommends approval of the requested scope change to add the Ashland corridor, the 63rd Street corridor, the expansion of the Hellstead Street corridor south of 70th Street to 95th Street, and the Chicago Ave corridor, adding a segment of Grand Ave, Illinois Street between Fairbanks Court and the Kennedy Expressway, and then removal of that Western Ave, Chicago Ave, and 79th Street corridors. The second project change we have before us is Grosse Point Road from Old Orchard Road to Golf Road.
Sorry, one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this is John Cherwinski from CTA. Just one point of clarification on that. The Chicago 79th and Western corridors, we completed a lot of the work, but we didn't complete all the work. So there would be some work we would still want eligible on those corridors, but there was basically enough done that we wanted to add the additional corridors. So I just wanted to make it clear we still would like to do some work on those remaining corridors.
Thanks.
So not to.
Any other questions about the bus slow zone elimination program at this moment? All right, then we'll continue on with that Grosse Point Road from Old Orchard Road to Golf Road. So the sponsor is requesting a cost increase of $130,000 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering to cover higher costs than anticipated. The CMAQ funding is for a bicycle facility that is part of a larger corridor improvement. And this project was let on September 23rd of 2022. And the low bid was $1.3 million higher than the program funding that included STP local, CMAQ, and some state funds. And just a little background on this, the project was ready for a March 2022 letting, but due to delays in certifying all the property settlements, the letting ended up being delayed to that September letting of this year, and construction unit prices also increased significantly over this same period. And the village decided not to concur with the award of the project, as they were concerned about the entire shortfall would be local responsibility. So the village is seeking to increase federal and state funding sources to allow this project to target that March 10th, 2023 letting and maintain construction in 2023. The project was re-ranked and it dropped from 12th to 15th among the federal fiscal year 2014-2018 bicycle facility projects, but would still be ahead of 3 projects that received funding in that same cycle. Staff recommends approval of the $130,000 CMAQ for construction engineering for this. Any questions on this one in particular, or any of the two, either of the two?
I was going to just ask a quick question on the CTA. I think this is, I agree with staff's recommendation. I was just kind of wondering in regards to, is the only comparison the ridership aspect, or were there other reasons for the scope change? And I guess I'm just a little concerned about adding a whole new project in a sense to the scope. But again, I'm not opposed to this. I think that this is a good program. I was just wondering how staff evaluated it.
This is Jason Reeder, the CTA project manager. The additional corridors were selected on a few criteria. Just running through them quickly. As you mentioned, they're all very high ridership corridors that are, important to the network as a whole. But specifically, Ashland, because it is, goes throughout the entire city, north to south, covering a large swath of that, including, equity areas. 63rd Street also serves, low-income neighborhoods, is a important connection on the south side of the city. Then Halsted Street, the additional segment to the south overlaps with a PACE project that has been identified as part of their PULSE program. So they've already done all of the phase 1 work to identify bus priority treatments in that additional segment between 79th and 95th. So the interagency coordination there, would make it one cohesive corridor, since they're actually proceeding with construction south of 95th on the portion that that PACE traverses on. And then as far as the expanding the Chicago Avenue corridor, there's a lot of the Grand Illinois Pair actually is traversed by the Chicago Route 66 bus. This just adds some more, this additional segment, which also has additional bus routes that use it as well for most of it. And the 65 Grand bus provides, a parallel connection that feeds into the same 66 corridor and Navy Pier. So that's just a quick rundown on why we landed on these specific additional corridors. We also have the preliminary work done on identifying bus priority zone concepts on these corridors. So they were quote unquote ready to go for project if we had the opportunity, and that opportunity presented itself after working with CDOT using other funding sources. We were able to complete some of the initiatives on Western 79th and Chicago already.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, yeah, I was just going to say that sounds great to me. I think this is I'm just going to look at the project as the bus slow zone elimination, and I think that this is a good effort to address some of those concerns.
Excellent, thanks.
Any other questions or comments on the two changes as proposed? All right, well, we would be looking for a motion for approval of both those changes as proposed by staff. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor. Do I have a second?
Rickert seconds.
Thank you, Tom. John, will you call the roll?
Sure. Mark Pitstick,
Aye.
Mayor Grasso,
Aye.
Chris Schmidt,
Aye.
Tom Rickert,
Aye.
Jeffrey Shriver,
Aye.
and Doug Ferguson.
Aye. All right, the project changes are approved. Moving on to the federal fiscal year 2024 to 2028 program development items. At our last meeting, we discussed a proposed change to add a new equity scoring measure, which would combine the existing inclusive growth score and a new disadvantaged community score, which follows the Justice 40 initiative as proposed by USDOT. Concerns at the last meeting were raised about the use of the DAC tool, which is something that was created by USDOT as a scoring mechanism. There were a couple different reasons for that. One, where no census tract in our region actually reached the 6th category, which was how we were determining top scoring. And then some of the areas that were included as disadvantaged or not disadvantaged didn't seem to line up with conventional wisdom. So staff took back what we heard and talked about some of the different alternatives. It was decided that we would still push forward with using the USDOT's DAC tool. And a lot of that, there's a couple different reasons for why we went that way. One, as of right now, the DAC tool is what USDOT is proposing to use to determine if the Justice 40 initiative is met with the CMAQ and TAP programs and other federal transportation programs that they've selected. But also, we understand that this is a in progress kind of item. USDOT is working to improve the DAC tool. CMAP staff is working through our Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations to help improve the DAC tool and the information that's used in determining equity as the programming cycles move along. And we understand that this is going to change. by no means of what's there today is going to be there, what's going to be there next year. So there's a good chance for the next cycle we'll be discussing potential changes related to this, and we're committed to adjusting as the information gets better and adjust with it. So with that being said, we are recommending some changes from what we originally proposed. We changed the scoring so as those census tracts that receive 5 or above would be scored at 10 points. 4 categories would be scored at 5 points, and 3 categories at 1. In addition to that, we're going to add a qualitative effort to ask project sponsors to describe how their project would address equity or would help or improve the disadvantaged community area around the project. So this would be a qualitative kind of thing. Staff would assess whether what was described was like legitimate, and that would determine if they would then receive the points as for the using the DAC tool. In addition to that, we would also provide space for applicants to provide additional information if they felt that the DAC tool did not adequately measure the disadvantaged community area around the project. And so they can supply additional supporting documentation either through another tool or from census information. And yeah, there's going to be some staff level decisions that have to be done to determine whether that is legitimate, but there are other areas that we do that for as well in the scoring of projects. So with that, so the scoring would look something like this in the application booklet, with the 5 or 6 disadvantaged categories receiving a 10, 4 with the 5, 3 with 1 point, and then disadvantaged categories of 2 or below would not receive any scoring in this area. Let's see. So this was kind of what we discussed previously. So the equity score would be a total of 20 points, with disadvantaged communities receiving 10 and inclusive growth another 10 points. The inclusive growth score was what we previously used in the last 2 calls, so there's nothing new there. But we would have to make some changes to the overall scoring. You can see we would reduce the points assigned to air quality cost effectiveness for the CMAQ program. And then for the TAP program, we would reduce the market for facility and safety and attractiveness rating by 5 points to provide those 10 points to the equity score. This was the same as what we previously proposed, so there's nothing new here. So staff would like to request approval of the committee to make this change for the upcoming call for projects. And with that, I would like to open the floor to questions and discussion. Any comments from the committee or questions? Yeah, Mark, you're on mute.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I appreciate the staff, continuing to work on this. I know we've talked about this a couple times, and I appreciate the adjustments that have been made based on some of the comments and the analysis that was presented by the CTA. And I think the recommended changes seem appropriate, and understanding that the DAC tool is, it's not perfect and it's a work in progress, and making some adjustments, and this may evolve over time. I think it's good to have some tool to base this on, but giving people a opportunity to provide additional information or adjustments, recommend adjustments, I think is appropriate. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Tom. Or Mark, sorry. Tom, you unmuted. I was ahead of myself.
Yeah, I think this is good too. I concur with Mark's comments. I know I've heard some concerns about how this impacts some of the distribution in the region, and I think this is a good step forward, and we'll need to see how it all plays out and continue to evaluate it. At this point, unless there's any other county members here, I intend to support it unless others have some concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate that like our scoring of projects is what we use to craft a draft recommended program. And not only does staff from time to time make recommendations that are outside the scoring, but we also invite the committee members if you don't feel that like somehow a score is properly represented for a project, we can make adjustments in the recommendation. The scoring is a guideline. It's meant to help us, and it's not going to be the final decision-making tool. So with that, if there's no other comments or questions from the committee, I would like to open it to any audience members that might want to comment or on the proposal. Is there anybody else on the call that wishes to address these changes? Well, I'm not hearing any. And I'm not seeing anybody in the chat wishing to talk. So with that, would somebody be willing to make a motion to change the evaluation methodology for the CMAQ and TAP programs to include the disadvantaged communities scoring as part of an overall equity score?
Hey, Doug, this is Chris Schmidt from IDOT. I would like to move to add the equity score to both the CMAQ project scoring and TAP-L project scoring.
Thank you, Chris. Do I have a second? I'm seeing the mayor raise his hand and give a thumbs up. All right.
Get a second, sorry.
No problem. So with that, is there any further discussion that's needed? All right, hearing none. John, will you call the roll?
Sure. Mark Pitstick,
Aye.
Mayor Grasso,
Aye.
Chris Schmidt,
Aye.
Tom Rickert,
Aye.
Jeffrey Shriver, Doug Ferguson.
Aye. All right, the change to the scoring methodology is approved. Thank you. So moving on to 6.02, the call for projects. Kama and I have been distributing this schedule for the upcoming call. Obviously, we haven't completed the application booklets 100% yet, but we want to get this information out to folks. So we're intending to open the call for projects on January 17th with a closing date of March 10th. Local applications will be asked to have their applications, or local applicants will be asked to have their applications into the ETIP database by February 24th to allow the PLs to review them for completeness and accuracy. And we'll release the summary of applications for your April meeting, and then the goal is to have a staff recommendation to this committee for the July 13th meeting, and then go out for a public comment period before final approvals go in August and then September, and with the final approval of the MPO Policy Committee and the CMAP Board on October 11th. Any questions about the schedule as being proposed? All right, well, hearing none, I'm going to move on. Actually, one thing I would like to add on the upcoming call before we move on to next year's meeting schedule. The carbon reduction funds, so there's some discussions that are going on concerning those. I just want to make you aware that there's a possibility that we may include those as part of the call. I'm not saying that that's a done deal. For that to happen, there will be further discussions that will happen at probably Transportation Committee and Policy Committee. So just bringing that up as something that may pop up, and I want everybody to be aware of it. I think everybody here has somebody that's represented on one of those two committees, if not both. So just bring that up so that everybody's aware of that. That may be something coming up, and I don't want anybody to be surprised where this is coming from. With that, moving on to the next year's meeting dates. So SDP Project Selection Committee and the CMAQ Project Selection Committee, Cam and I met and we sat down, aligning with not only the development of the call for projects, but also meeting changes for IDOT's letting schedule and the required tip changes that need to happen. We put forth these dates, understanding that we could need to change something depending on how the year goes, but these are the dates that we want to publish and put out there. So today we would ask for the committee's approval of these in advance of the upcoming year. Are there any comments or questions, concerns with the dates as being proposed? All right, hearing none. Do I have a motion for approval of the dates?
Rickert moves.
Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second?
Second the dates. Schmidt, IDOT.
Thank you, Chris. John, will you call the roll on the minutes?
Sure. Mark Pitstick,
Aye.
Mayor Grasso,
Aye.
Chris Schmidt,
Aye.
Tom Rickert.
Aye.
Jeffrey Shriver. And Doug Ferguson.
Aye. All right, the minutes are approved for next year. Moving on to other business. Is there any other business that the committee member wishes to bring forward?
Doug, this is Chris. Just really fast, you mentioned the carbon reduction program. I'm not sure how familiar folks are with that funding that's coming to the state, but the TMAs, so that would be CMAP, will have an integral part in how those funds are going to be used and the strategies the state will put forward for carbon reduction. The discussions on that will be starting here just at the end of this month and beginning of the new year. We'll be having meetings with all the TMAs in Illinois and non-TMAs about those funds. So just wanted to kind of firm up or add more color to that work is ongoing, and that we look forward to having good dialogue with the staff and the MPO on how we move forward with that.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I would add, for those that are unfamiliar with the program, there's a requirement that there be a performance plan that's developed for carbon reduction as a state. But there was also the additional, there was funds that were suballocated to metro regions. And in October, IDOT informed us that they intend to give the programming authority for the allocation, suballocation for Northeastern Illinois to CMAP as far as programming. So that's kind of what we're talking about. It's a very similar program to CMAQ and the types of projects that are eligible. And unlike CMAP, it has the goal of reducing CO2 emissions, but everything is fairly in line with that. And so we think there's probably some commonality between the two. And, just wanted to make everybody aware of that. All right. Is there any other business? Hearing none. We'll move on to the public comment period. Staff did not receive any public comments in advance, but if there's anybody in today's audience that wishes to address the committee, please unmute yourself and identify yourself. Or you can also put your name in the chat and we'll make sure to call on you. Not seeing anybody. Is there anybody who wishes to address the committee? Going once, going twice. All right. Moving on to the item 10.0, the next meeting. So our next meeting will be February 9th at 11 a.m. And with that, seeing no other business before the committee, I'll call for adjournment. But before that, I want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a happy new year coming up. And we'll see you all in the new year. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Stick moves.
Thank you, Mark.
Second.
Thank you, Mayor. All those in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.